town of the good, the bad, and the weird. You either live by the gun, or you die by the sword.
Welcome to The Good, the Bad, and the Weird. I'm Nico.
And I'm Chris.
And today we are doing our second short. Today we are talking about a movie that I am actually really enamored with. And
I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
It was a good movie.
Today we're talking about Midsommar.
The spiritual successor to Wicker Man.
Yes. This movie is everything I hoped for in a Wicker Man remake without being specifically tied to the Wicker Man, which,
yes.
Honestly, if they had proposed it as another Wicker Man movie, I would have skipped it, probably.
Yeah, I think they did good to cut that tie completely. And also the fact that, the, sacrificial cult genre isn't real big helps just push it a little closer to that.
And I want to talk about this movie, but I also don't want to really spoil anything because...
Same. This is one of the few ones, and this is coming from someone who really likes things spoiled. This one, it's very nice going in blind.
And even then, when we showed up to this movie 15 minutes early, walked into the theater, and they were playing like the last 3 minutes of the movie still.
So we already knew who died, but that's okay.
No, that's the thing. We didn't. We assumed what was going to happen because of what we were seeing.
This is true.
And it didn't reflect that, which I thought was refreshing too.
Yes, I will say that if you watch it while thinking about like your classic scary movie sort of tropes, everyone does fall in, for the most part, in a way that doesn't shock you as far as like what happens to them.
Yeah.
But I think that was part of the point, because at the end they like visually play off of each of the characteristic tropes. And
even then, with the character tropes, they feel believable. They're not the over-the-top jock. They're not the over-the-top nerd. They're not the over-top comic relief. He seems like a real dude that you would go on a trip with and complains the whole time, but
yes.
He's there.
He's there. He got invited. I will say that is probably one of the strongest points, other than the visuals of this movie. The strongest points, I think, for me, was the character development, because everybody had character development, including the side characters and characters that you didn't even like. You didn't jump in hating anyone's guts from the get-go.
Nope.
You developed that hate.
And so, a brief synopsis for those who have not seen the movie or are kind of on the fence of seeing it.
Yes.
If you've seen Wicker Man, you've seen the base of this movie.
Yeah, definitely.
It's about a woman who goes to Sweden with her boyfriend and her boyfriend's classmate and friends to study a pagan culture and society, or a
commune, I guess?
Yeah, a pagan commune in Sweden. Yeah,
they're invited there by one of their friends. That's his hometown, his home village, or whatever you want to call it. He invites them, and then shenanigans occur.
Yes. That's
scary shenanigans.
That's one way to put it. But for me, this movie, I love the cinematography for it.
It was beautiful. Absolutely beautiful.
Characters, the script, you could feel the craft that went into making this movie.
This movie was very, someone scrubbed this movie with a fine-tooth comb, and it shows.
Yes.
There wasn't any blatantly obvious details that got left out. In fact, there was dialogue details that normally would have just been filler junk that actually did help round out this community, and explain bits that you're like, but what if they address it?
The only thing that I had a little bit of annoyance with is they start off when they're speaking in Swedish, or their ancient dialect, that they translate it. Yeah. I kind of wish that they hadn't translated. I kind of understand why they did.
Yeah.
But she early on in the film, one of the village members specifically states, and for our non-Swedish speaking guests.
Yes, but I think they didn't translate the whole, they speak Swedish throughout the whole movie / whatever. I don't speak any Swedish. So I'm not 100% sure if it's all Swedish, or if there's some ancient dialect going on, or if there's village gibberish going on. I don't really know. Mm-hmm. But they don't translate it throughout the entirety of the movie, which I think is part of the movie experience, because at the beginning, they're building a trust with you and the community, so you can kind of understand what's going on, you can read the subtitles, and then the subtitles slowly start disappearing.
and come back a little bit, and then for like the last half hour of the film, you don't ever see subtitles.
Exactly.
But this movie is the director's second film. I can't remember his name. He did Hereditary.
Yeah, I don't remember his name either.
Which I just watched Hereditary yesterday and part of today for the first time because it's been a movie that's on my list. My buddy Rick's been really wanting me to watch it for a while, and I figured might as well just go ahead and watch it. And the director's style definitely carries through.
Definitely. Oh, for sure.
He reminds me of, there's a couple films that it kind of, the film style reminds me a little bit of it. Some of it reminds me of Irreversible.
Yeah, I can see that.
And, with a little bit of Enter the Void.
Yeah, there's some specific film shots that I can definitely see Enter the Void in. And
they do there's a great transition. One of my favorite shots in films is when they transition from like one room to the next and they cut over or through a wall.
Yeah. There was a lot of really well done transitions. There was very purposeful transitions, more like not even in such a way where they're having you blend the transitions so you don't notice them. Everything was either a artistic transition, so it felt, you're flipping, the camera's flipping, the world's rotating, or it's a snap, and it's a jarring snap every time.
Yeah, and speaking of artistic horror films in general, I stumbled upon an interview on my way home today with Joe Bob Briggs, who I guess is a director, writer, he's a film critic, writer, and comic performer. And the guys from the last podcast on the left were interviewing him, and they were talking about these high-end artistic horror films.
Interesting.
And
sounds like your shindig.
It is, but at the same time, they were talking about why are these films like what has happened to horror where it used to be this drive-in film that you go to see, these grindhouse films where you go to see a double feature of these bloody, violent films.
Yeah.
To main station films. Like,
it's definitely an interesting thought, and one that you should hold on to for once Child Play comes out, because I think that would be a good comparison.
Yeah, you know my taste in films. I love everything from high-end art to the bottom of the barrel gore fest or just horribly written, directed, acted films.
And I'm here for just garbage.
Exactly. I think it is an interesting transition. There's been a few films in recent years that I saw. One, Hereditary.
Yeah.
Which we'll talk about that one at some other time, because I do want to talk about it, because there's a lot going and a lot not seen that I feel the director had a better control of in this film.
Yeah, and especially if you watched Hereditary like I did. I watched it when Netflix was hyping it, or I think it was Netflix.
It's on Amazon.
Well, I know it is now, but I don't think originally it was. Mostly because I haven't been on Amazon in a real long time.
The movie hasn't been out in like a year.
Yeah, so I watched it when it first was getting hype, and I know me and several other people were kind of disappointed with it because it was advertised as this, standard horror film, and it really didn't belong in that genre. I think if it had been advertised as it truly is, which is more of a psychological think piece, I think it would have, been received a lot better. This one, on the other hand, already set the audience up for what they like. You weren't gonna walk into this movie expecting not a cult movie.
Yeah,
you kind of knew what you were getting into. There was definitely parts that they didn't shed. There were, like, even as someone who watches all the prequels and interviews and advertisements and everything, there are definitely portions that are there specifically to ground and shock.
And my only knowledge of this film before going into it was the premise of it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, this seems like a rehashing of Wicker Man. Let's see what they do with it.
Yeah, and I do think that they did a good job. And one of the other things I'll compliment is the location that they picked for this movie by picking rural like small village, middle of the mountains, Sweden, which everyone knows Sweden, but you don't know Sweden.
Yeah.
So like it gives a level of believability. Whereas if they had done this in like America somewhere, it would have been a lot easier to have been like silliness.
It's an island off of Washington.
Exactly. Like,
he's a California cop.
Yeah. I mean, it's a lot harder to dismiss a lot of the stuff that could have been plot holes because, you know, I don't know what rural Sweden looks like.
And that's the thing, too, is we're used to seeing communes and cults in films as these dark hooded characters. And this is a very bright, sunny
almost
movie.
A reverse interpretation of the, you know, cult murder.
Mm-hmm.
You definitely are led to enjoy the cult, believe in the cult, root for the cult, even while they are killing people.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, like, these alternative views and ideas have become so mainstream that we see it and it's like, okay, I can see people believing in almost kind of a new age, but it's very ancient kind of thought and practice.
Yeah. And I do think that the variety of characters who are experiencing the cult and the murders do a good job of kind of representing a little bit of the different reactions that the audience had when we were watching it. There was definitely, you know, the scholar sort of mindset of, well, yeah, I see your point. This is your culture. There was the just pure and utter, like, shock and horror. The denial. There was quite a few who were just trying to rationalize it, but definitely were not rationalizing it real well. And then there was the two little girls behind me who I'm not sure why they were there.
Well, no, I figured this out while I was working today. Like, the reason they got high schoolers into it is because there's no one at the ticket booths. It was...
Oh, that's right. You just paid for your own ticket.
Yeah, they didn't check ID. There was no key. There was
I should have just bought a child's ticket.
Yeah.
Would have been cheaper.
But, I mean,
I would... Even by a horror movie fanatic standpoint, I would not have said this movie was a... high on the list to show your high schoolers or even, you know.
No, they were not prepared. There was actually the people in front of us who walked out during a very specific scene.
Yeah, they weren't ready for that one either.
Oh, no.
I will say, like, especially because the movie posters and the trailers do paint this as a very, very psychological horror. There is definitely some hard gore in this movie. Yes.
And that's the thing I love about, too, is it's a mainstream movie, but it doesn't hold back.
No, it did not hold back at all.
There's a lot of nudity.
You see a lot of boobs
and penises.
Yeah, and
asses.
There's a lot of butt. There was a lot of butt in this movie. Surprisingly, there's a lot of bad words too, if that bothers some of you guys. And then the death was not artfully glazed over.
No.
In any way.
It is a very intense and involved movie. It's not a movie to go in lightly.
No, definitely not. And then because we're following the main character, the main lady, girl, I don't even remember her name. Jerry? Danny, the main character. Since the world is kind of viewed through her eyes, the audience experiences what she goes through in a very felt sort of way. So when Danny's tripping on drugs, the audience feels like they're tripping on drugs because they went ahead and showed the world moving and shifting.
Yes, and it was so well done. That's why it made me think of Enter the Void a little bit.
Yeah, definitely.
Because there's a heavily drug influenced scenes, and then there's like the normal in between. Yes, and then the other thing that is potentially something to maybe consider before you go see it is on top of the standard murders, which I think we're all at this point expecting and ready for, and then the gore, which, you know, if you're ready for a gore movie, it's not the worst gore I've ever seen. It was definitely very realistic gore, but it's not the worst gore ever. You can close your eyes and you can make it through the movie just fine. Yeah. However, Danny's panic attacks and mental problems that she deals with are portrayed in a very triggering sort of way. It's done very beautifully and very intentionally. However, being in a dark theater, potentially by yourself if you're going to go see this movie, you might want to bring a friend. Which we saw this on a Monday at 7 o'clock when
Yeah.
there was very little people in it. Well, that's the other thing too. I'm curious how this movie's actually going to do. I know it's going to do well critically. I'm just kind of curious outside of that, because I told my parents I saw probably one of my most favorite films of this year.
Yeah.
And they've never heard of it. And these are my parents who my dad goes to almost every single movie that's out.
Yeah. I think for people who, like us, who really enjoy this sort of movie, or just, gore movies in general, this movie will be something you seek out. They're going to love it. The general audience who accidentally ends up at this movie, they're the ones who probably not going to enjoy it.
No.
At least not in movie theater setting.
Yeah, and that's even at home, I feel people would have a hard time with this, because, like...
It's a very realistically portrayed
It almost
movie.
reminds me a little bit of, in some of its film styles and, like, the drug sequences... It kind of reminds me of this film that you should watch at some point, called Antichrist with William Dafoe. And
William Dafoe.
That movie, like, it's... That movie's actually pretty brutal at times, too. And very, very much in the way this movie is, where it's a very realistic... And that's the thing with these art house and kind of recent horror films, is they deal with a lot of realistic... realistic settings and themes, like
the struggles that Danny goes through in this movie were very realistic and very relatable.
And we were talking earlier today about the first film, Hereditary, and how it's very similar in many ways. It's kind of similar to The Babadook, but how one portrays it differently, like because the Babadook, your husband's friend who hates that movie.
Yes.
Like, I mean, I can understand why people would hate it, because they're going into it with these expectations. And it's why I don't watch trailers. Like, I'll read the synopsis and I'll maybe hear the director talk about it a little bit.
Yeah.
But I, for the most part, avoid as much as I can about movies, especially ones I want to see or are interested into, because I want to go into it. I'm always going to have a biased view towards things or movies in general, because I've seen so much. I have a taste for specific films, and I like what I like, and and I don't like what I don't like. But I can appreciate films, even if I don't like them.
Yeah.
But I want to go into a movie not knowing what's going to happen. Even if I can guess the ending, like with Captive State. I guess I figured out the big twist at the end about a third of the way through the film.
Yeah, and like this movie's not hiding its ending at all. Like, you know who's going where really early on in the film.
If you've seen Wicker Man, you know this movie.
Definitely. And even if you haven't, even if you're just, a standard horror movie fan, you know for the most part what's going to happen. The enjoyable part on this one is seeing the ride along the way. The journey on this one's much more enjoyable than the actual surprise ending or the twist halfway through the plot. And I think part of that is probably because this one, the twist isn't really in the middle or at the end. It's at the beginning with the fact that the cult seems nice.
Yeah.
And not even just seems nice like how the first Wicker Man, oh, look at this delightful, happy cult. Oh. No, like, this cult made you feel like family. Yeah,
and they do address that really differently, because the first one, in the original Wicker Man, he's a police officer coming to investigate this missing girl.
No police anywhere in this country, apparently.
Yeah, well, they're on a remote island, but they're all like, he is a complete outsider, and they don't welcome him at all. They're pulling his legs. He walks outside, and there's an orgy in the lawn.
Yeah, and this one, on the other hand, welcomed the guests in, it welcomed the viewers in, it wanted you to feel like this family was here for you, they wanted you here, they wanted you to stay with them because they loved you and they understood, and I think that was probably the best way this movie could have gone.
Oh yeah, no, I'm actually really curious about this director. I want to see his work, because just from watching Hereditary and going to this, there is a huge leap. And Hereditary was filmed beautifully.
It really was. I think its main complaints was more of plot holes and
I'm fine with minimalist plots,
Yeah.
But they could have introduced certain elements sooner.
Yeah.
This film, you don't feel it. Like we were talking about it on the ride back home. Like we dive into like Celtic lore and Scandinavian traditions from time to time, and it felt super realistic. I really want to save this movie for a deep dive later. If we do this, we'll have to cover both Wicker Mans and Wicker Tree. We've
already seen the Wicker Mans this year, though.
That's why I'm saying for later. And that's part of the reason why I really wanted to see this movie, is because I had seen both the Wicker Man movies recently.
And I will say that, especially having rewatched the first Wicker Man, because the one with Nick Cage, don't get me wrong, while a piece of gold in and of itself, the first Wicker Man definitely... you can definitely see the correlations and the symbolism between these two movies much more clearly. And I think the symbolism in this movie was done in a really nice way. There was enough deep symbolism that people like you and me caught it, appreciated it, and enjoyed it. And then there was enough really blatant symbolism that, like, people like my dear husband and, like, the 12-year-old girls sitting behind us, even they caught it.
That was the most annoying thing. Know a little bit of what you're going into the movie, like read the synopsis, but they went in, and anytime anything different happened, it's like, wait, what are they doing? Why are they doing that? What?
It took them a really long time to comprehend why one of the characters was experiencing a different meal than some of the other characters. And this was one of the symbolisms that had been very blatantly laid out, like a storybook level blatantly laid out for you beforehand. And that part cracked me up just a little bit, because they were truly puzzled up until like the last second. And it was great.
That's kind of part of the thing, is that why I really want to do a deep dive, is the symbolism and also like the level of magic.
Yeah, they did a very good job researching their magic when they did this.
Because that's one thing I've been listening to a little bit lately. I've been listening to some of Joe Rogan's podcasts on drugs. And there's this thought that a lot of these religious beliefs and systems come from people tripping.
I mean, that would make some sense.
Like the story in the Bible about the burning bush.
Yeah, I mean...
There's a plant in that area that brings up, like, people who take this plant come back with this mind-altering experience.
Yeah.
And it's very similar to what's told in the Bible.
Yeah, and this one definitely did a good job of... The drugs were not something like how we see in other movies where it's the enemy, nor is it the motion of the movie. It's just part of the background noise of this movie. It's
part of the background noise, and it's part of their lives.
Yeah. Like at no point is this like a bunch of kids sneaking drugs into a like nice, sweet community. No, the community is the ones handing out weird ass tea.
Yeah, well, I mean from my understanding, a lot of the shamanistic cultures and beliefs, that is a big part of it, is taking these mind altering substances to elevate your thought and become the next form of human evolution.
Yeah. And I will say that on the detail level, again, both with the research that went into creating the world of this place, the detail that went into the sets of this place was both stunningly beautiful and also it detailed in such a way that this movie has a replayability.
Oh, yeah.
Like, you could definitely enjoy a frame-by-frame couple of parts of, like, especially, like, inside certain rooms of the building, because you can see motifs and stories painted on the wall, but they don't linger with it on the camera.
No.
So, it would be fun to go back and, like, actively study what's going on in this one.
No, I'm super excited for when this comes out on DVD. This is definitely one that I would buy at full price. I would get my money's out of it. Money's worth out of it.
For sure.
But overall, I can't say how much I really enjoyed this film. I mean, it had everything. It had the high art, it had the gore, it had the violence, it had the stupid people.
It did have quite a few stupid people.
But that's what made it so great. And it's not that they were stupid, they were just ignorant of the culture.
Yeah, and just, I don't know. The characters don't ever start off as like, wow, aren't you the dumb one? They develop into, wow, you're being the dumb one.
Yeah.
Which I think tied everything together really nicely.
Mm-hmm. So,
now, the real question, though, is this movie worth going to see in theaters? Is it worth that $10, $12 price ticket?
For me, yes. If I was to go to a specific cinema I prefer, that we don't have around here, unfortunately.
A nice, comfy one.
But even then, I would say, for someone like me, this is a must-see film.
Yes, I would agree. If you had not seen this movie, I would have been a little jarred.
Yes. But what about you? Would you go and pay a full price evening ticket for this movie?
That's a really hard question, because I thought this movie was absolutely beautiful. I had no quarrels with the story or the plot or the characters, which is saying something because I can usually find something to be upset about. Mm-hmm. I thought that, the gore was really well done, effects-wise, and while it was jarring, it wasn't, I guess, inappropriate.
No,
like, it felt like the correct response. Same thing with the very strange sex scene in this movie. Like, as weird as it was, it didn't feel forced or wrong. It felt like the correct answer to what does weird cult sex look like.
Yeah, no,
that was the correct answer.
They did a fantastic job, which,
yes.
By the way, that is the scene that those people walked out on.
Yeah, no, it was a lot. That was a lot to take in, and that's one of the only scenes that I would say you'd have a hard time keeping your eyes closed long enough to make it through that one. But that one's not a gory scene. That one's just a lot of butts and boobs.
I will say, if you do go see this with people, go see it with people you're comfortable with.
Definitely.
Because you and I, we watch this kind of crap all the time.
Yeah.
Your husband would not have enjoyed this.
No, he might have enjoyed it if we watched it in like a friend setting on the couch once it came out on DVD.
With a few drinks down.
With a few drinks down, and like with the understanding that this movie is for him to just be artsy as shit with and not really comprehend.
I would put it in the same level as Gozu for him.
Yeah, definitely. And I think eventually he could enjoy it. I just don't think he's a very focused person.
Yes.
So he's not gonna let his mind wander and think about the movie as the movie's going. He's engaged with it scene by scene. Mm-hmm. So I think I don't think he would have enjoyed it. I don't think it would have been worth his ticket money. Was it worth my ticket money? I'm going to say tentatively yes. I hate movie theaters because A, they are too dark, they are too cold, and they are too loud. However, this movie is not loud. The music for it is absolutely beautiful, and it is not jarring, it is not upsetting.
No,
it is beautifully done music. The dark and cold is something that I can just overcome on my own if I really, really want to. The only thing that gives me the hesitantness is if someone like me were to go see this movie with either by themselves or with friends they weren't super comfortable with, I probably would have had to leave just to calm myself back down after some of the anxiety attack scenes. Mm-hmm. They are very, very realistic and very much pull you in, but that's the point of them. Yes. And if you go when you're comfortable and enjoying the movie fully, it is a great watch.
I would go to this alone, but I'm a weird person, so
I think it is some people's perfect cup of tea, other people's lukewarm cup of tea, and some people are going to not like this movie whatsoever. No. It is definitely a cross-the-spectrum movie. However, if you are into cult movies, if you are into the realistic gore movies... Beautifully shot movies, this movie is something that is worth your ticket price.
Yes.
If you are just a casual moviegoer, I would wait for it to come out on DVD and have a group night and then watch it.
If you even want to watch it.
Yeah.
So. But, anywho, this has been the second short of The Good, the Bad, and the Weird.
Thanks for listening.
Peace.